Serious. What are some cryptid, ghost, or unexplained stories you'd be willing to share? One afternoon, I was at work. I walked past a room with a window in the door and automatically glanced in the window. There was a woman standing in the room. Except there are only 3 people in the building, and the other 2 were in the office behind me. I took a couple steps, realized what I had just seen, and backed up quickly, but by the time I got back to the window, the room was empty. There was only one door, and when I opened it, the room was empty. At the same building, a coworker was telling me that she was in the office right around the corner from that same room. She couldn't see the door, but she could see the shadow of the door on the floor as it slowly opened and closed. She was the only one in the building at the time, and she refused to check. I arrived about an hour later and she asked me to check the door, and it was still locked. I worked there about 3 years and every single one of us had stories. We heard voices in empty rooms. Once we were sitting in the office and we heard somebody breathing in an empty corner. It was common to be in one of the rooms and think somebody had just walked into the room, only to look up and find that the room was empty except for you. I had one manager who scoffed at all of our stories. She did not believe us when we told her there was something fairly benign but creepy in the building. We were sitting in the office, she scoffed and loudly said, "If there's anything in here, prove it." We all held our breath, kind of nervous, a bit scared but also curious. And just about the time my manager was getting that look on her face that said, "Ha, told you so," something was thrown out in the hallway. It took us several minutes to work up the courage before going to check and finding that a book that normally sat on a bookshelf near the front door had somehow gone from that bookshelf around the corner and halfway down the hallway. The manager never talked about it and quit shortly after that. I've since quit also, but last I heard they were still hearing voices and seeing shadows in the building. When I was 7 years old, my grandma was in the hospital dying. At the time my family was strapped for cash and my mom was pregnant, so only my dad went to California, where she lived, to see her before she died. The day that she died, we got a phone call from her with her wanting to talk to each of us saying how much she loved us. A few hours later, we got a call from family members saying that she had passed away. When we told them that we had just received a call from her a few hours prior, everybody was in disbelief, saying that she had been laying unconscious in the hospital bed all day and she could have never called, yet alone been able to articulate her thoughts to us. To this day, we have no idea how she called us, and I don't think we ever will. I grew up in an old house, and my family definitely experienced events that were hard to explain. Besides all the usual noises and occasionally hearing your name being spoken. Here's the top 2 weirdest things. 1. My brother and I were teens, eating dinner in the kitchen. There was a glass of water on the counter. We heard a noise where the glass was and both looked toward it, and we swore we saw it move an inch. As we were still looking and discussing it, the glass flew several feet across the counter and smashed onto the floor. 2. Once when I was in college and I was home for holidays, I was in the kitchen getting food prepared. I was home alone at that point, and my brother was due home at any moment. I heard the front door open and close. I called out hello to my brother and heard nothing back. Then I saw a shadow pass by the kitchen into the hallway, and I assumed my brother was being rude, so I followed and kept calling hello. I saw the shadow again, turning another corner toward my brother's bedroom. I saw my brother's door closing. At this point, I was calling out about what a jerk he was because we hadn't seen each other in months. I pushed the bedroom door open and uttered some insults in the room, as well as the whole house was empty. That was super chilling. I really had seen someone moving through the house. Flash forward 15 years later, and when my husband and I bought an oldish house, built in 1870, I was up in the 3rd floor arranging boxes, and I heard a very clear and very polite woman's voice say, "Well, hello there. Never saw or heard anything in this house since." There was a really weird occurrence at my dad's house a few years ago. He awoke to the sound of dogs barking and realized the neighborhood dogs were barking at something that was moving parallel to the road. When his own started to bark, he went outside to see what was up. Across the street is pretty much all forest except a church directly across the street that at the time was just a gravel lot. My dad was too far away to see anything, but in the dead of night, he could definitely hear the sound of someone running at full tilt across the gravel. A few things freaked him out from this. 1. Whatever it was, definitely ran on 2 feet. Try having a dog run on gravel versus a human and you can tell the difference. And it was big. Both myself and he have witnessed large animals like bears and moose running through the underbrush, and according to him, it sounded like it was of a similar size to those creatures. 2. It was easily running somewhere around 40 to 50 miles per hour in the clearing of the lot, then slowed down again as it went back into the woods. He was able to compare the speed because the road itself is 45 miles per hour limit, so it was going just as fast as a passing car. 3. The final thing. Its huffing and gasping was so loud, he could hear it from his front door and was obviously not human. We looked online later to compare its sound to other animals, and it really didn't sound like anything he'd ever heard before. The freakiest part was the almost synchronous reactions the dogs had. He's never heard dogs react like that before. Both him, my stepmom, my stepbrother, and several of our neighbors all can account for hearing the strange barking from the dogs, but it was only my dad who heard what they were after. Nothing happened like that since, and I've never personally witnessed anything like it. We do live right on the border of the Cascade Mountain Range and are surrounded by park and federal land, if you want to get an idea of where this took place. About a decade ago, I was visiting a graveyard to pay my respects. This was back in my family's home country. I was feeling absolutely fine throughout the day, but come time to leave the graveyard, I suddenly felt like I couldn't walk by myself. My shoulders were extremely heavy, my body was drained, and my legs felt like they were being anchored down by weights. More specifically, hands. It was as if I had multiple hands grabbing me by the ankles, so I couldn't keep walking. I actually felt quite panicked, so I told the family member I was with that I'm literally feeling like my life forces, for lack of better translation, are being sucked out of me, to which they nonchalantly replied, "Well, they probably want your young, lively spirit." In the end, I had to be carried out of the premises. At my old middle school, I would have volleyball practice twice a week in the evenings. My sisters, 2 years older and 5 years older, did the same thing at my age. I remember going to return the volleyballs upstairs for my coach one night into her classroom, which was 2 stories above the gym. I made it up the stairs and saw the door for the class across the hallway start to slowly open, and a really bright light and smoke or something slowly drifting out, almost dancing. I booked it downstairs and waited a little bit until my coach could walk up with me. The door was shut like nothing happened. About 8 or so years later, I was talking with my sister, 2 years older than me, about what I saw, and I was half expecting her to think I was being crazy. I go into detail, telling her what it looked like, which classroom and door and everything. She wasn't responding to me, so I looked over at her for the first time in a couple minutes, and she was crying. She told me she saw the exact same thing too, and couldn't go back upstairs alone ever again. She was relieved to finally find out that she wasn't making it up in her head or being crazy. We thought of all the possibilities of what it could be. Custodians cleaning with the lights on and maybe smoking? But nope, it was too bright for any normal lights in there, and way too dark outside for it to be shining through any window. Plus, the custodians would always clean after school and before our practices. School was done by 2:30, and practice was always 6:30 to 8:30. We've heard many other stories from other kids at the school who had after-school activities and would hear weird things. Still creeps us both out to this day. It was a rainy winter morning. My father and I were pulling out of the driveway headed to school. We both saw a glimpse of a girl in a white dress, barefoot, blonde, maybe 5 years old, run around the corner of our home and out of sight. We both looked at each other and acknowledged that we witnessed the same thing. He got out of the car and ran around the house to look for her. When he came back, he said he couldn't find anyone, but called my mom to let her know that a little kid might be running around the yard. We thought it was weird, but not much was said of it. And there weren't any missing kids in the area. A few months later, we were remodeling our basement and found a photo album hidden behind the drywall. It was full of photos of a little girl with blonde hair in a white dress. The photo album was from 1922. The family that originally lived in the house died of TB. This is from the time I was 13. I remember it clearly because it happened the day I found my cat. That day, I returned home kind of early from school because I used to walk, but that day, I took the bus. So, nobody was at home at that hour except for me. I was eating something before taking a nap, and the phone started ringing. I answered the call, but there wasn't any sound in the other side. I hung up and was about to go when it started ringing again. I answered and nothing, so I hung up again. That happened many times in a period of 20 to 25 minutes. The phone started ringing for the 10th time, I think, and I was angry at that point because I thought someone was playing a prank, but no. This time when I answered, there was someone, and that someone was crying and in the background. There was a very creepy and, believe me, inhuman laugh. It sounded metallic. Just after I asked, "How can I help you?" I heard the person who was crying started to shout something that wasn't in my language. Then it stopped. Then I heard the laugh sound closer, and at that point, I was super scared and just hung up the phone in shock. It was a minute later I realized that maybe I had witnessed a crime or something similar, so I started checking the call record to tell the police what number was the one calling. It was empty, no calls that day. I was astonished. I called the police and informed them about it. They called me hours later very angry, telling me that they contacted the phone company and there wasn't any call to my phone at the hour. I pointed this thing that had happened. Until today, I don't know what the heck happened, like I'm trying to seek an explanation to this.